Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus. Before we jump into today's bonus, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. A few years ago, while driving on a back road in Vermont, at around 1 or 2 a.m., we spotted something dark in the headlights. Roughly 50 feet ahead was this solid black mass. It looked to be waist-high at max, possibly slightly shorter. But a few things we both remember most is its stance. It was so weird and unorthodox in its movements as we crept closer and closer in the car, with the high beams illuminating the creature. Now, it was just 10 feet or less from the car, and it was shaped kind of like a dog or a wolf, but more than anything, my first word was wolverine. My girlfriend had never seen a wolverine, so she had no idea what this thing was, but it was doing these weird circles, kind of eyeballing us. Even at possibly 80 pounds, its mannerism were causing us to panic. We had never seen an animal move like this, somewhat like a bulldog, thick and wide, very muscular frame. Muscles were visible through its fur. I remember its forearms on the front legs were kind of bowed inward, but the thick part of its leg must have been as big as my upper arm. It wasn't huge, we're talking 3 feet tall or so, probably 3 feet wide. Weight isn't possible because of its weird body. But to me, it looked like a 100-pound nasty wolverine with a canine head. All black. It wouldn't leave. On this dirt road, it kept circling out in front of us, almost daring us to get out and investigate. I'm in love with the paranormal, and I'm convinced we were looking at something nobody or very few people had ever seen before. Man, I wish I had my camera. We started beeping at it because at this point, we're scared for our lives. Even inside the locked car, this thing was giving us bad vibes. Something told us if it wanted to get in, it was getting in. The whole event lasted 2 minutes, and it eventually started to walk off the side of the road very slowly. As burly and as rugged as this thing looked, all I remember is how slowly it moved. And it eyeballed and taunted us the entire time. Once we got home, I showed my girlfriend a wolverine, and she said, "That's it." I ended up talking to a field biologist about this the very next day. He made it well known that it's impossible that it was a wolverine. I said, well, it's either an 80-plus pound, extremely big, burly, massive, and nasty-looking wolverine, or it was a werewolf. He jokingly said it would be more likely to be a werewolf than a wolverine in Vermont. I still to this day wonder what it was, but I am so thankful we were inside the car. Had we been on foot, I had this overwhelming feeling we would have been slaughtered. Anyway, that's my experience. Today's second encounter. In the early spring of 2009, I'm at a bush party with a bunch of friends. The party's dying down, the fire's still cooking, and I wanted to wait for it to go out. I didn't want to burn down the woods near my cousin's coal mine 10 miles northwest of Centralia, Pennsylvania. So I'm sitting by the fire watching it burn down. It starts glowing, you know how the embers are cooking out. I start to hear this teeth gnashing sound like a rabid dog. I always keep a rifle and a shotgun in my truck because we have black bear, and my cousin always claimed that there were mountain lion up here. So I go to the truck and fire it up. I don't make it 50 feet down the path, and I see what appeared to be a 6.5-foot wolf staring at me over the thicket there, right through the brush, just looking at me. I know there are no gray wolves or anything in PA in that area, so I swing the door open and I fired the shotgun at it, trying to scare it off. Somehow it ducked. I got in the truck and hammered down the whole way home. Now, to put this in perspective, when I say long distance very fast, if you look at a Google map from Centralia, PA to outside of Shamokin, PA, I would say it's roughly 20 miles in a straight line. About 3 hours after I get home, I'm going to go out and grab the shotgun. I'm going to clean it because I fired it and it was howling. Buddy, it was up in those woods behind my old man's house. Next day, I pack my stuff and move out to Lebanon, PA. You can take this experience with a grain of salt. You can do with what you want with it. But we got a lot of abandoned coal mines up that way and a lot of creepy stuff in Centralia. I mean, that one hunter was supposedly killed in Northumberland County, which is the same county as an alien abduction, the Todd Seas case. The best way I can describe the creature, I don't know, like some people suggest Bigfoot has to do with aliens and that stuff. I'm not qualified to make that assumption, but what I will say is, have you ever seen the movie Dog Soldiers? That's exactly what this thing looked like. That's exactly what it looked like, except it wasn't wearing torn up gloves. I'll tell you what, it was creepy. I get chills every time I hear any kind of howling sounds. The scary part about it was that it was like a normal dog howling at the moon. It almost, if you play with your computer and try to make a werewolf sound a little bit more electronic, like a distortion, it'll sound perfect. This is that case that he was mentioning. The disappearance and eventual death of 39-year-old Todd Seas has been one of the most mysterious cases in Northumberland County, PA. In the early morning of August 4th, 2002, Todd Jeffrey Seas rode his ATV, starting at his home at the base of Montour Ridge in Northumberland County, PA, Point Township, on a short jaunt up the mountain trail adjacent to a sprawling high power line. After he failed to return home by noon, the family became concerned and notified authorities. A massive search effort ensued, which included search and rescue personnel with search dogs and helicopters, local and state police, as well as an organized search team that numbered 200-plus volunteers. The entire area, from the top of the ridge adjacent woods and family property, was explored, including a small pond located 70 feet from the Seas' home. Divers and dogs searched the area in and around the pond with no success. Since that time, there has been very little information released to the public. The death was ruled as fatal cocaine toxicity, despite evidence suggesting that something else most likely occurred. The circumstances involving the recovery, handling, autopsy, and final arrangements with the body were also marred in controversy. I'll check that case out for you guys and explore a little more into it. But you know what? One of the key things that I clued in on is always the victim blaming. You know, they blame it for... They always just... Anytime there's a victim and it's something involved with the paranormal, whatever, cryptid, UFO, whatever, there's always a insinuation or always some kind of by the media mention of drugs. And here's another one, you know. Also, what's kind of funny to me is that the search party searched that area 36 hours before and yet found him, which is very similar to the Richard Timothy Honecker case when they searched a culvert a year prior and there was no one in there. And then a year later, there's Richard Timothy Honecker's body as well as another person in that cave. So anyway, let's move on. Today's third creepy experience is not going to be a Dogman, but something similar to a crawler. The more I think about things, the more I really want to blame the government when it comes to these crawler creatures. If you guys had heard the interview I did with Laura Eisenhower, I asked her about crawlers because I really do believe that what goes down in Dumbs and Nightmare Hall at Dulce, I believe these creatures were created in those labs. I know there's been accounts of ghouls and stuff like that years prior, but something about these things just does not add up. On to today's next encounter. I live in a nice little seaside town in Canada that has many of these little swamp bogs in certain parts of the town. Usually not a lot goes on in these bogs, as you can't really build in them, and there's not a lot that lives in them except for maybe some frogs and muskrat. Anyway, one Friday night 4 years ago, I decided to take a break from my university studies and go for some drinks at the local bar with the boys. It was a really good night with lots of drinking to be had, and around a bit after 3 in the morning, I decided to start walking home, as I only lived about 15 minutes away. I was about halfway home when I noticed something unusual in one of these bogs. From what I could see, it seemed there was some kind of light coming from the water. At first, I simply told myself that it was probably just my drunk mind playing tricks. But alas, curiosity, with help from liquor courage, got the best of me, and I decided to approach. It was what I saw then that I still to this day cannot make sense of. What appeared to be some sort of strange-looking creature started to crawl out of the bog with what seemed like 2 very muscular front arms. As it crawled out further, I got a better glimpse of its body, approximately 5 to 6 feet long, with 3-foot tail. Didn't seem to have hind legs, just its front arms, but it did seem to have a slimy underside, as it moved quite fast and left behind a somewhat noticeable layer of slime. The bioluminescence was coming from this massive bulge located on its forehead and extended down its spinal column. I was completely stunned by what I was looking at and couldn't move as my body went completely numb. At first, the creature clearly didn't notice me, as it was headed in the direction perpendicular to mine. I assumed that because it didn't initially see me that the creature may not have had great eyesight or any eyes at all. It must also have poor sense of smell, as it was not drawn to me. It was only when I let out a foolish "WTF is that thing?" the abomination stopped dead in its tracks and turned its hideous head towards me. It was at this point I could clearly see 2 large black eyes open from its eyelids staring directly at me. As soon as it saw me, its bioluminescent went out, and I was left blinded in the pitch black. I heard a horrific screech, almost like bird screw, but much lower and sounding like it came deep from its gut. I could hear the creature start to charge at me. As I heard its large body cut through the tall bog grass, my fight-or-flight instincts kicked in, and you can be damn sure I chose flight. I picked the nearest street lamp and ran as fast as I could through the grass till I got to it. When I got back to the street, I was surprised to see no sign of this creature behind me. I'm unsure if it wanted to harm me or just scare me out of its bog, as I had seen it moving at an alarming rate as it initially left the bog water. Surely it could have caught a drunk, staggering 22-year-old man. I went home after that and vowed never to go back to that bog. After I finished my degree, I moved to Toronto, and I have not been back since. I still cannot come to terms with what I saw that night, and I'm not sure what to do. I just needed to share to get this off of my chest. Wow. So, that's pretty creepy, man. Like I said in the intro, a subscriber submitted video clip of a Dogman. I woke up this morning scanning through the email, and in and amongst all of my emails was a couple of subscriber submissions and stuff like that, and a video. I watched it and I was like, my God, this is probably the most disturbing yet clear video of a dogman. The subscriber who submitted it asked to remain anonymous, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to honor that, and here is that video. Like I said, some very compelling video footage. And the subscriber stated to me that he has not sent this anywhere else. He was hesitant even sending it to anyone, but felt that it needed to be shared. So there it is. Wow. On to tonight's fourth encounter. A couple years ago, I was backpacking with my brother in the mountains of West Virginia. To get to our destination, we had to drive about 2 hours up a very long and deep-ditched road. After reaching the mountain, we got all our gear out of the car and started up our hour-long hike into the woods. Our destination was at the edge of a small lake. Behind us was a long path back to the car, which was covered by fallen trees and thick brush. The area was surrounded by high, jagged cliffs. After about an hour of resting, we set up camp and started a fire. We proceeded to cook as the sun set over large rock walls across from the lake from us. Just after the sun went down is when the strangeness began. Every half hour or so, my brother would hear what he said was a soft footsteps coming from the trail behind us. I was really tired and kept blowing it off as a joke. However, as the night pressed on, he refused to stop talking about what he was hearing. I told him to shut up because I was tired of hearing about it. At around 11 p.m., the situation becomes more bizarre. I nod off with my head propped on a log. Suddenly, a loud crash could be heard from across the lake. My brother and I both jumped to our feet, grabbing our shotgun and a .44 mag. Walked to the edge of the lake to see if we could spot what that noise was. After a minute of staring into the pitch-black night, we decided to go back and lay down. We both thought it must have been a loose boulder that had fallen off the face of the ridge. That was until my brother told me to stop in an abrupt whisper. "Look there," he said, pointing toward the ridge to our left. It was then that I realized my brother was really hearing things all night long. About 100 yards away from us, in the tree line, was a figure that looked to be at least 10 feet tall with glowing golden eyes. Paralyzed with fear, my brother and I watched this large figure sway back and forth, never taking our eyes off of us. "Let's get out of here," my brother yelled while shooting around from his .44 into the lake. At this point, the figure stopped and stared. Its eyes seemed to get larger and brighter. Then, just as quick, the eyes were gone. We immediately started stoking the fire as fast as we could, not knowing if that figure would return. We decided to stay up all night, taking turns adding logs to the fire. After an hour or so, we heard a faint rustling in the brush. The rustling then stopped, when all of a sudden this thing roared out the most terrible roar or growl we had ever heard. We grabbed our guns and gear. It was time to go. We both started to sprint into the darkness with our lights turned off. We ran into the woods for 10 minutes or so until the two of us were out of breath and stopped. We turned our lights on to find the path and listen. It was moving towards us. We could hear the pounding of its footsteps and branches snapping. This time the light stayed on as we ran non-stop, tripping over obstacles until we reached the car. The two of us threw our gear into the car and locked the door behind us. My brother was shaking with fear, fumbling with the keys. Just as he got the keys into that ignition, a loud roar from that creature blasted from the darkness. He starts the car and guns it. I don't know WTF that thing was, Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever. All I can say is that I will never return to those woods to find out. Tonight's fifth encounter. I've only shared this experience with a few people in all the years since it's happened. It was the first Tuesday of Pennsylvania deer rifle season, December 3rd, 2013. I've always been an avid hunter, and I'd wake up very early in the morning to get to those woods before daylight. It would be about 4:30 in the morning. Having to hunt on state game lands meant beating other people to the woods to get your decent spot. I got to the parking area at around 4:15 and no one else was there, so I walked into the woods, not using a flashlight, only walking by moonlight. I walked through a field into a tree line and started on a path to the spot. I came to an intersection in that path. One way went left and down the mountain, the other way went right. I went right because my spot is on the other side. Roughly 50 yards after making a right-hand turn, I smelled what I could only describe as hot garbage. It hit me in the face, hot dumpster juice in the middle of August. I stopped dead and turned my flashlight on, expecting to see piles of garbage. Nothing. No garbage, nothing dead, just hot garbage stink. Keep in mind it's December, it's cold, high 20s, low 30s. So even if there was garbage, it wouldn't stink that bad. So I kind of thought nothing of it. I followed the path to my spot, which was down over a ridge from the garbage stink. Roughly 40 feet down that leads into a grass field where I would sit. I set up my seat and settled in for a couple minutes, and that's when rocks started coming down that ridge. First rock startled me, causing me to turn my flashlight on again, scan the field, hoping to see some eye reflections of a deer, but nothing. I sat back down. Another rock comes down the ridge. This time I stood up and went into the grassy field with my flashlight and my pistol. My rifle was a .444 Marlin that I carried while hunting. Scanning again, nothing purposely. Waited in the field for about 5 minutes. Now I'm getting angry, assuming another hunter's messing with me because I'm in their spot. I sit down again, and a third rock, sounding larger than the others, comes tumbling down that ridge. I don't get up this time. Not 2 minutes after that, another rock. Not tumbling, but sounded as if it was thrown off the ridge, and lands in the field. Screw that, I'm pissed. I gather up my gear and start heading back up the trail. I get to the top of the ridge, scanning with my light the whole time. Nothing, no eyes, no other hunter. I get to the spot where I smelled the hot garbage. Nothing. The smell's gone. Finally, it clicked in my head. It may have not have been another person, possibly something else. I've heard other stories of people's Sasquatch experiences, a lot of which remark how bad they smell. I all but ran out of those woods, and to top it off, no other vehicles were in the parking area when I got out of those woods. This took place in Pennsylvania State Game Lands, 229, outside of Tremont, in Schuylkill County. I later come to find out that a coworker of mine had actually seen a bipedal creature cross in front of his car 2 miles from my location. Maybe they are real, I don't know, but I definitely had an experience I won't forget. Tonight's final encounter. My boyfriend and I were driving home after a date night in Silverton, Colorado. I don't remember exactly where, but it was about a year ago. We're driving along a back road, no streetlights, just a one-lane road with cornfields to the left and tall grass to the right. It was late, completely pitch black out, and we could only see as far as the headlights would let us see. My boyfriend was driving, and I'm in the front passenger seat on the phone. He's singing along with the radio, and all of a sudden he stopped. I look at him, and his eyes are huge as he slams on the brake. I drop my phone and slam my hand on the dashboard to brace myself, which was not the best idea. I ended up hurting my wrist. I yelped and clutched my wrist, but when I looked up, my throbbing wrist left my mind and fear replaced the pain. We did not brake to a complete stop, so we're still rolling. A coyote had stepped out of the grass on the right and was walking right in front of our truck. Now, I've studied wildlife in college, so I know my stuff. This coyote was wrong. It sent chills up my spine. It was large, almost wolf-sized, but obviously a coyote. Identified by its coloration and features, the strange thing was it was stiff. At first I thought the animal was injured, but after a second I realized that it almost looked like its skin was tight and it couldn't move, like someone was wearing a coat too small for him. Its legs were strangely long and lanky and seemed to almost glide with small shudders each step. As it crossed our truck, it stopped and turned its head to look at us. Its eyes were empty, human-like. It stared at us for what seemed like hours, but really it was just seconds. It continued to the cornfield on the other side of the road. Right before it walked into the field, it stopped. Then, in a flash, it ran into that field. Now, I wouldn't have thought anything about this experience until what happened next. From the same spot this coyote thing walked in, a split second later, a naked man comes walking out. At that point, my boyfriend floored it. I was screaming, "WTF is that?" It took 10 minutes of me screaming at him for my boyfriend to tell me. All he said was, "I think that was a skinwalker." He refused to talk about it, and it's still difficult for me to comprehend. I know it seems crazy, but that's our experience. All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed this bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd really like to thank you all for supporting the channel. Your support is truly what makes the channel continue to grow and go, and what makes it a very special place for people to want to share their experiences, theories, ideas, without judgment and with respect. Thank you. That is all on you guys. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They're out there. They're dangerous. Share this info with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless.